The grim truth about children's lives at the hands of abusers first seeped out, then became a torrent over more than 2 decades. Rapes on filthy mattresses, beatings, being burnt, drugged and threatened.
I felt really bad and dirty and ashamed, and once you're in it, you're trapped.
But how individuals and authorities covered it up? Well, victims have waited years for that reckoning. Today, the Home Secretary revealed key details of how their national inquiry will work.
I have announced the chair and panel of an inquiry which will shine a bright light on this dark moment in our history. They will do so alongside the victims of these awful crimes, who have waited too long to see justice done. This inquiry is theirs, not ours.
But for some, it doesn't feel like it. Survivors only found out the chair of the inquiry will be former Children's Commissioner Anne Longfield when it was leaked before the announcement.
We found out literally through the survivors doing their own work. I have got no faith left in this inquiry whatsoever. And the fact that all of these girls that actually left the panel got all the abuse and trolled for what, the truth has come out now. Why can't we be heard? You're making it look like we are being heard, but you are not hearing us.
It has been a long and troubled road to get here. At the end of last year, in a letter to Oldham Council, the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips rejects calls for a national inquiry, suggesting they set up an independent local one instead. But Elon Musk then lights the touch paper on the current row in a series of New Year posts on X. As the opposition begin to pile on pressure for a national inquiry, something they rejected themselves in government, the PM angers many when he says this.
What I won't tolerate is politicians jumping on the bandwagon, now so desperate for attention that they're amplifying what the far right is saying.
It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape.
Just a couple of days later, keen to address fears that nothing is being done, the government pledges support for a series of local investigations, still claiming a wider one is unnecessary.
We already know what the major flaws are, and my argument is we should get on with that action.
In June, Baroness Casey's audit of group-based exploitation, often described as grooming gangs, unveils decades of institutional failure. The government can resist no longer.
That's why we're immediately implementing her recommendations for a national criminal operation to go after the perpetrators, for a national inquiry to underpin local investigations into failures.
But within months, the process is in total disarray. A number of women on a survivors panel resign, claiming they're being ignored and used. The hope is that today's announcement rebuilds trust. A promise from government it will be laser focused on grooming gangs. No area will be able to resist investigation. It should last no more than 3 years, beginning next March. The job of trying to bring and keep survivors on board set to continue until then. Well, earlier I spoke to the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, who helped set up the inquiry, but whose position was called into question by some of the women who were on the inquiry's survivor liaison panel. I began by asking her whether she felt as though she had done enough to get the inquiry back on track.
It is difficult, it is complicated. There is no one sort of victim. There is no one victim that speaks for all victims. And I have to say, I don't think it is this process that has let these girls down over the years.
No, but you have to acknowledge that this process so far has let a lot of the women down. It has. I mean, for example, whose idea was it, or who decided it would be a good idea to let victims and survivors know who the chair was going to be by watching it on Parliament TV?
Well, the Victims and Survivors panel, which of course is also just a snapshot of victims and survivors of this crime in the country. There's no way that we could have consulted with every single victim, but even the Victim and Survivors panel, I myself and Louise Casey, throughout this process, have met with them and talked to them about the kind of person that they wanted to see as the chair.
But they didn't get a say as to who it was today, did they? Some of those people on the panel met your other two potential candidates, but told us that they're left Googling who you chose.
But Anne Longfield will, and with Louise Casey, will be meeting those victims tomorrow. And what we did was we took what had been told to us by that victims panel, which again is a snapshot of victims, to decide on who would be best to take this forward. Of course, it has been a difficult process throughout. This was never, ever going to be easy.
Fiona Goddard, you'll know her well.
I've met her many times.
Survivors of years of horrific abuse, was the first to leave the panel. When she realised that the name was being announced today in Parliament without, she says, survivors, even those who remained on the panel, being told, she says, I was right to leave. This proves this. No one gave a crap about what we had to say.
Well, I mean, all I can say is that I'm sorry that she feels that way. Of course, I give a crap about what the victims and survivors say. I've been speaking to them today. I'm sorry that she feels that way. She is always welcome to come and talk to me.
But what's gone wrong? You know, Carly, who stayed on the panel, desperate to make it work, she said, I mean, I can't repeat exactly what she said, but she was not just angry, she was really, really upset. She said, this government has groomed us all over again. This has been a coercive process, a tick box exercise.
Look, all I can say is that my door is always open to those people to continue having conversations with them, and that they're on the panel. Carly, as you say, remains on the panel. It's for her to reveal that, not for me. There are many other people on the panel, so no one survivor is going to agree with all other survivors on almost anything in life.
Some of the women, again, have talked to us about their nervousness that Anne Longfield, she's a Labour peer, she will be expected to oversee investigations into Labour councils, some of which we understand do not want to be investigated on this issue. How confident are you that she will be properly rigorous?
Well, the first thing I'd say is Anne Longfield is no longer a Labour peer. She is taking a step down from the Lords and from her Labour whip throughout the period of this. And also what I would point to with regard to whether Anne Longfield can hold Labour councils accountable, Anne Longfield was employed to go and work to hold Bradford Council, a Labour-run council, accountable when their children's services was failing.
But some councils did overlook. They did overlook
Many
this because of the issue of ethnicity.
Many councils of all different stripes. They will be Labour, they will be Conservative, and this inquiry will have no fear or favour about who it looks into.
And just finally, I mean, we know that the crimes that will be examined here are still going on up and down the country.
Yeah.
So what does success look like? What does a successful process look like?
What success looks like is that for a girl today, wherever in the country, that when she comes forward, she is treated differently to how those girls were treated. So what success looks like for me is not just more people behind bars, of course, that's what you want to see, but it looks like systems that see those children for what they are, and that is victims of a heinous, unforgivable crime.
You ever consider resigning over this?
I've made myself feel tired just talking to you. Look, if I thought that there was somebody who would be better to drive this forward, then that's always what I would want to see. And I think that the people we have picked for the inquiry are the very best people to really hold this to account, and so I look forward to working on them. But look, I have a lot of fight left in me in wanting to get this right and wanting to make sure that children and women in our country are safer.
Jess Phillips, thanks very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Well, joining me from Oldham is Lucia Rea, an advocate for child sexual exploitation survivors. Thanks very much for joining us. So the inquiry finally has a chair and a panel and a draft terms of reference. What are the people you're speaking to, the survivors of grooming gangs, telling you today?
Oh, hi, Jackie. I was just getting more and more annoyed as I was listening to Jess Phillips there, because she's giving textbook answers, that they're clearly revised answers, and this is what triggers the survivors, and this is what they're annoyed about. They get the same responses. They can almost predict what they're going to say, and this consultation process has clearly been decorated with survivors so they can tick boxes to appear to have consulted with them, and it's not what's happened. They've not listened to them. They've got a Labour affiliated person to chair it, which, you know, she could be the best in the world at this, but she's Labour affiliated, and it's a concern to think how much will she have to delve into evidence in Labour run councils where most of these crimes have happened. And it's okay, Jess saying there earlier that she went into Bradford to look at social services. This is a national inquiry now, not one department in a local council.
So when Jess Phillips...
it's just not coming across as good enough.
When Jess Phillips says that, you know, Anne Longfield, the inquiry, there'll be no fear or favour, you simply don't believe her?
No, I don't. And the survivors won't as well, you know, because they've ruined the trust. You know, they've not consulted with them on that panel. Like I said, they've used it to decorate it. So, and anything good that came out of the panel they would have took credit for. I said this yesterday in the press conference with the Conservatives, and anything bad, if it blew up, they'd blame the survivors. Now, they've not even took their view on this, and they've not listened. They didn't want a Labour-affiliated person, and that's what they've given. And they wanted a judge. She isn't a judge. There's no legal backing across these three ladies that have been put in charge of this inquiry.
So there are a couple of things going on here, aren't there? They're whether the survivors have been listened to. And what the Minister says today is throughout this process, she has been talking to and listening to victims and survivors. And you're also saying that because Anne Longfield is not a judge, she is the wrong person to chair this. Can you move forward on that basis? Will the victims and survivors attempt to put any trust in this process?
How can, and this is what is so frustrating, that they don't listen, and it's like they just want it to fail from the offset. We needed to gain the public trust. It's like the local communities with Oldham. Now we've been lost in all of this. You know, we wanted people held accountable. How much is it going to be diluted now? We didn't want to be a case study in a national inquiry, and that's probably what we'll end up being. They've not listened to anything that's been said by anybody. So all Jess Phillips' umpteen meetings that she's had with survivors, they've all been a waste of time. She makes false promises, she builds up the hopes, and then they drop the bomb and crush them, and it's got to stop.
Lucia Ray, I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm sure we'll talk to you and other survivors again, but thanks very much for talking to us this evening. Thank you.